If you're a fan of all things fighting games, then you'll be intimately familiar with SNK's King of Fighters series, and with how many of these games have been released over the years, there's a good chance that you've played at least one of them before. Recently, I was playing KOF 12 as a form of self-inflicted torture, and I had an idea, I had a thought. What are the King of Fighters spin-off games like? I mean, all the other big fighting game franchises have spin-off titles, and with how many business avenues SNK have explored in the past, there has to be a bunch of these games for KOF, right? Luckily for us, there are. A crap ton, in fact. So much so that I've had to narrow the list down to 4 so as to not make a 3-hour-long video. Perhaps the most interesting quality of many of these spin-off games is that they don't fit into the fighting game genre, often incorporating wildly different gameplay mechanics and visual styles from one another. After mentally preparing by taking a language course in the KOF 2002 Fightcade lobby, I think I'm now ready to tackle this subject once and for all. Let's see what we can find by analysing some of the King of Fighters spin-off titles. Starting off with a game I had never played before, 2010's KOF Sky Stage was a Japanese arcade exclusive before being ported to the Xbox 360 as a digital game worldwide later that year, and that's how I'm experiencing the bullet hell. Speaking of which, yeah, this game can get really crazy with the amount of visual clutter it throws at you, but that makes dodging enemy projectiles that much sweeter. There are 6 playable characters here, and each of them possess varying projectile trajectories, which is awesome. Just like how they all have different attacks in the mainline KOF games, Sky Stage fits them with different attack strategies too. After picking your favorite character, you're whisked away into the first level, which serves as a nice spot to get familiar with the game's controls, but not before watching a visual novel-style cutscene. Sky Stage's narrative involves Orochi trapping our heroes in what's known as a dimensional prison, and after Chizuru comes and gives them all the power of flight, they channel their inner Ikaruga and embark on a quest to defeat Orochi and save the day. The story is a bit simple, but come on, it's a bullet hell game, so I wasn't expecting something like, I don't know, Killer 7 in terms of thematic depth, and it's an overall good excuse to have these characters flying around. There were extra cutscenes before and after boss fights, and I was always entertained when reading through them, so good job SNK. When the action begins, you can move in 8 directions, as well as shoot, drop a bomb, and even use a super attack. By defeating enemies, you build up your meter, and by charging it, you can use one of 3 supers. The more you charge, the more powerful the super will be, but as you can't attack while charging, you have to pick your spots carefully. This mechanic reminds me of charging up meter in other SNK games, and it's a great tie-in to their fighting game output. Personally speaking, I don't play a lot of bullet hell games like this, and when I was researching other games in the genre, I realized that I had only really played Ikaruga before, but I had a much greater time with Sky Stage than I expected going in. I've always been a big fan of fast-paced action games where you fight enemies up close, like Devil May Cry and Ninja Gaiden, so it was interesting experiencing a more projectile-based form of action game. Slipping and sliding your way through enemy territory where your eyes try to decipher the carnage flying at you never got old, and experimenting with different characters and strategies was a really satisfying experience. Out of all of the characters, Cooler is definitely my favorite because of her massive attack range and Snowman Strike, and her level 3 super often got me out of a bad spot because of just how big it is. If you're running low on lives, you can earn more by gaining points, and you do this by blasting the crap out of enemies. When they go down, they drop these KOF medals, and the type of medal changes depending on how close you were to them when they were defeated. Basically, the further away you are, the less points you get from collecting a medal, and this incentivizes players to try out a close-range game plan. However, being right up close to the enemy is like asking to lose some health, so a risk-reward mindset is introduced here, and with how fast the entire game moves, you don't have a lot of time to make decisions. Throughout the title's 5 levels, I was constantly on the edge of my seat, just barely making it through the seemingly endless waves of plasma the enemies were throwing at me, and it kept me hooked. When I completed the 6th level, I was under the impression that I had seen all there was to see, but then I found out that the SNK wiki claims that there is a second loop of the game, so I had to investigate. Okay, you see these little character cameos? There's one in each stage, and if you shoot the character enough times, you can collect an envelope. If you collect all the envelopes and then beat the whole game on a single credit, you enter the second loop. After doing everything I could to ensure I was getting the best possible challenge, I managed to reach the true final level, one that makes you do battle with Omega Rugal. This second loop feature is fantastic, and it provides players a legitimate reason to keep playing the game. One thing I tend to dislike about some action games is when their levels are overly long because of how many enemies there are to dispatch, with the worst offender being the supermarket level in No More Heroes 2. This level sucks, man. But the levels in Sky Stage fit into that sweet spot of being long enough to not feel anticlimactic, but short enough to not become tedious and repetitive. Overall, the gameplay systems of Sky Stage are awesome, but what also impressed me was the content on offer here. The Bullet Hell Mayhem is the title's main draw, but you can customize it in a way that fits your needs as a player. The difficulty, life count, and point requirements can be altered within certain parameters, and there's even a training option if you want to grind out sections that are giving you trouble. It's also possible to play locally with another person for some couch co-op action, and you can even go online via Xbox Live. I can't imagine that anyone is still playing this game online, but it's really cool how online play is present here in general, although I can imagine that really shoddy internet connections from back in 2010 would cause major lag on the game's dated netcode. As a small-scale digital title, there's not much for me to complain about. I really wish that Sky Stage was on PC so I could go for all the achievements on my Steam profile, but as a fun game to kill some time with when I have my 360 hooked up, it gets the job done pretty perfectly. We're off to a really good start actually, so let's see if the next game will measure up. Okay, nothing could have prepared me for this next game, as it's totally unlike the mainline KOF entries. Some of you might see where I'm going with this judging from the footage I've put on screen, but the King of Fighters Battle to Paradise is a Mario Party clone released for the Neo Geo Pocket Color. We all know how to play Mario Party, right? So it shouldn't be too hard to read the information on screen and then deduce our objective in this game, but there's one tiny problem. This game is entirely in Japanese, and as the closest I've gotten to Japan is eating one of their cows, I have no idea what any of this means. I did some research and I found out that the story involves 4 boys and girls who love KOF, and as is common in Japan, the kids then get sucked into their Neo Geo pockets to participate in a journey filled with KOF characters. Even though I can't read a lick of Japanese to save my life, I still appreciate the game's cutesy and very childlike demeanor, as it's a nice break from all the mature games I've been playing recently, and it didn't take me too long to brute force my way through the game's menus. Anyway, after picking your striker and naming your main character, you can choose how many rounds you'd like to play, as well as the map you can explore. Movement is decided by what your die lands on, and you can collect coins and items depending on where you land. Eventually, you'll enter a battle with the other player, and these usually come in the form of memory and reaction tests, guessing games, and quizzes about other SNK properties. The games without heavy amounts of text were usually the ones I did alright in, but I still struggle to read the instructions. After some time passes, a well-known KOF character will jump onto the board to either help or hinder certain players, and it was awesome seeing these characters in this game's unique art style. As you progress through a match, your coins and stars will increase, and the winner is the player with the most at the very end. I think. This is probably the most logical interpretation of the game's HUD, but I'm unsure if there are any other factors that influence how the winner is decided, so I'm unable to give you a detailed breakdown of how the point system works. Forgive me, my dear viewers. Just like in Mario Party, you'll never know what will happen next until you roll the die, and this suspense is paramount to any good party game. Worrying if my opponent would somehow gain a massive advantage in an instant was a feeling that plagued me throughout my time with this game, but I mean that in the best possible way. There's a feeling I get from this game that's really hard to put into words, but I believe it has to do with the language barrier. Because I can't truly understand anything that goes on, it leads to the whole experience being defined by uncertainty, which kept me intellectually stimulated. Now look, I don't want to be like a Reddit armchair philosopher and describe Battle to Paradise like it's some form of advanced hypnotherapy, but as I don't play many games that aren't in English, I felt a very unique way when I was rolling dice and encountering KOF characters in this title. The only personal downside I have, and this pretty much applies to every party game I've ever played, is that it can become a bit mundane after a while. A game like this is best when played with other people, and hell, it's even in the name of the genre, party game, so I can't imagine playing more than like 30 rounds at a time. Maybe I'm getting old, but this is just more than enough for me, and I can't imagine playing close to 100 rounds in a single sitting, even with other people. As the title released exclusively on a handheld system, it encourages players to experience its offerings in short bursts, and I believe that this is the best way to play to avoid it becoming repetitive. The best part of these wacky Japanese games is how they can make you think you're going left and then swerve right when you least expect it, often making you witness to its insanity, and Battle to Paradise's unpredictability, especially in shorter play sessions, is what I enjoy the most about it. The way I see it, if you have prolonged exposure to a game like this, you'll lose that feeling of wonder and trepidation, so I purposely avoided playing for more than 20 or 25 minutes or so at a time. Aside from potential monotony, the only real issue I have with this game is that I really wanted to play as the KOF characters. Look, I have no problem with the kids here, okay? I'm not heartless, and I'm sure this one will graduate with a master's degree in Taylor Swift studies, but I think it would make the game an easier sell overall if the KOF crew were the actual playable characters. If this were the case, a potential mechanic would be using their individual powers to manipulate the outcome of the match in their favor. Athena could use her psycho powers to confuse the enemy into throwing low dice numbers, Kyo could burn them to steal coins, and Yamazaki would probably just stab them. Even if it didn't impact the game, he'd just do that. So I feel like it was a bit of a missed opportunity. In retrospect, I had a lot of fun with Battle to Paradise, and I hope it gets an English fan patch one day so more people can actually play it without being hindered by the potential language barrier. I'd recommend trying it out if you like party games, and who knows, you may enjoy it even more than I did. It's time for the first fighting game of the video, so if you missed throwing out fireballs and DPs, then you won't have to wait any longer. Released for the Game Boy Advance in 2002, the King of Fighters EX Neo Blood is a port of KOF 99 Evolution, which the SNK Wiki calls a Dreamcast remake/port of KOF 99, like the original 99. As the King of Fighters is a 4-button series, it makes perfect sense to port it to the GBA, as the system itself has 4 buttons that players can use. All of the gameplay strategies enjoyed on the arcade and home console versions of other KOF games carry over here too, and this means that we're off to a pretty good start. You have access to all your character's regular and command normals from the previous entries, and they can link it to special moves for some satisfying combos. On the topic of special moves, they feel as solid as ever despite the downgraded visuals and audio. Anti-airing with Rising Tackle or using Clark's Argentine backbreaker to put the fear of God into your opponent is good fun, even on the GBA, and for KOF veterans, it means that you can breathe easy knowing that your favorite character hasn't been gutted. In my view, one of KOF's greatest qualities was how its characters all serve different purposes, with gameplay diversity shining through their unique designs and animations, which fortunately carries over to Neoblood. The only minor criticism I have so far is that some attack animation frames are missing in Neoblood when compared to KOF 99, but with how limited the GBA's memory was, this couldn't have been avoided, and I still think the characters animate really nicely. Segueing over to the character select screen now, there are 20 fighters to choose from, with the sepia-looking column on the right containing striker characters, and we'll cover this striker mechanic in a bit. Fan favorites like Kyo, Terry, King, Leona, Mai, etc. all make default appearances in Neoblood, although Iori and Gisao would have to be unlocked. The only newcomer is Moe, and I think she's a lot of fun, especially because her mobility options are off the hook. She has a Rekka, a DP, and Dudley's short swing blow from Street Fighter, and when combined with the Cherry Blossom sprite art, I took a liking to her pretty quickly. Some of her moves outright mention the Kusanagi clan in their names, and with how similar her idol animation is to Kyo's, fans of that character may be interested in trying out Moe. A roster of 20 characters on the GBA is pretty darn good, especially when they control this nicely, so I have to say that the roster's completeness is my favorite feature of Neoblood, and it only gets better when you hit the lab. Much to my surprise, the extra game mechanics here all add up to form something greater than the sum of their parts, and it made testing things out in training mode very entertaining. Rolls make an appearance, and you can input one by pressing both light attacks. Interestingly, you can also roll backwards here, and this means that you have access to a strike invincible defensive option. Not being limited to forward rolls felt weird at first, but I quickly got used to it, and it added another layer of strategy to my KOF experience. You can also press both heavy attacks on the ground or in the air to knock the enemy down, dealing respectable damage in the process. It's not entirely responsive in the air, however, as even though I would press both buttons, I would often get a regular heavy punch instead, I'm not sure why. This can also be used to get out of block stun at the cost of 1 bar, and you can also roll out with the same meter requirement. Speaking of meter, there are some really interesting uses for it in Neoblood. In addition to supers, which function the same as in other KOF games, there are 2 installs you can enter. Counter mode lets you do more damage, as well as letting you cancel some normals into supers, although some of the supers have been slowed down here to prevent you from comboing into them, most likely for game balance reasons. It was tricky figuring out how to combo into supers with certain moves, but if you like to lab all possible outcomes in fighting games, this will definitely keep you occupied. The other install is Armor mode, and this mode gives you super armor as well as the aforementioned damage buff. If you block a special or super in this mode, you take no chip damage, making it great to use if you're down on life, although multi-hit strikes can break through your armor. All of this is to say that KOF Neoblood is really rich in game mechanics, and we haven't even gotten to the striker system yet. Pressing light kick and heavy punch together when at least one of these orbs are present will call in your striker character. Every character performs a unique attack when summoned, and it's up to you to find one that complements your point character. Aside from the combat system, Neoblood has an acceptable amount of modes, although it's nothing I haven't seen before. Arcade mode, survival, time attack, and training mode are what's on offer here, and they provide some decent fun in short bursts. There's also a multiplayer mode that makes use of the Game Boy Advance's link cable to connect 2 systems, but I wasn't able to try this out. My favorite mode of the bunch was the training mode, funnily enough, as it provides players with all the tools needed to learn how to play the game, and you can even mess with the training dummy's movements, which was nice to see in an old school handheld fighter like this. After looking at it holistically, I wouldn't say that KOF Neoblood is my favorite portable fighting game ever, but it's still pretty damn good, and just like with KOF Skystage, I enjoyed it more than I thought I would going in. As the final game we'll be covering, The King of Fighters Neoave is a somewhat infamous entry in the series, as it's essentially an altered version of KOF 2002. Released for the arcades in 2004 and PS2/Xbox in 2005, Neoave is one game in the series that I've never played before, so let's get into it. For starters, there are nearly 50 characters here, with 12 of them being secret fighters who are revealed by holding R1 over certain characters. This roster is huge, and with how unique all the characters are to play, I can't lie, I'm really impressed so far. In a similar vein to Neoblood, all the characters' iconic moves are here, so I was able to have some fun pulling off deadly raves with Geese. In a move similar to Capcom vs SNK 2, Neoave contains a few game styles to choose from, and they're meant to fit the needs of specific types of players. The first of which is Super Cancel mode, and this gives you up to 3 bars of meter, as well as allowing for special cancels. You can perform regular supers with 1 bar, as well as super special moves at the cost of 2 bars, and these can really put the hurt on. You can also use a bar to perform evasive techniques when in block stun, as well as roll normally, so this style reminds me a lot of Neoblood's mechanics. The second style is Guard Break, and this is a little bit like Garou Mark of the Wolves in how it functions. When selected, you have access to Just Defend, allowing you to quickly attack out of a block. However, unlike Garou, this doesn't heal you and you can't do it in the air. My favorite part of this style, however, are the critical wires. With at least 1 bar of meter, input quarter circle forward and both heavy attacks for a strike invincible wall bounce. To top it off, it's very easy to combo off this should it connect, so if you have a hard read, go for it. You can also perform super desperation moves at any time, as long as you have the meter for it, and the inclusion of rolls helps to incorporate some defensive strategy into this style too. Finally, Max 2 mode is characterized by its raw damage output. You only have 1 bar of meter, cannot roll, and can only perform super desperation moves when your life bar is in the red, but you have increased damage and regenerating meter. Characters with strong supers can make great use of this style, as well as those with simple high damage combo routes. A universal mechanic that ties these all together is called heat, and I think I may have heard that somewhere before. By pressing L2 when your life bar is not in the red, your character will enter this state, buffing their damage but draining their life. When combined with Max 2 mode, you can do even more damage, so if you're the type of player who likes to bully the opponent with annoying strikes, you might want to check this out. I especially like this style of play when playing as grapplers, as it makes their intimidating gameplay even more potent. Knowing that they can lose a lot of life from one command grab or combo will put fear into the hearts of many opponents, especially if you hit them out of nowhere with a big super. If I'm being honest, the style system is what I enjoy the most about Neoave, as it lets players interact with its systems in a manner that best suits their wants and needs regarding gameplay flow, as well as innovating on the series formula. Outside of the style select, Neoave doesn't really bring anything to the table that I haven't seen before in a KOF game, leading to it feeling stale after a while. Absolutely demolishing the enemy's life bar is really fun, but you can do just that in many other titles, and as far as I can tell, there are no newcomers in this game to shake the roster up a bit. I also think that the game's sprite art doesn't mesh too well with the 3D stages, and although this isn't a huge criticism of mine, I really wish the backgrounds fit in more. In addition to this, the content on offer here is also predictable, with nothing really grabbing me. It was cool going through the gallery at first, but then you quickly realize that it only contains the character renders, so if you were hoping to see concept or promotional art, then you're out of luck. I also wasn't caught by surprise by anything during my arcade mode runs, and this is comparable to Neoblood, but at least that game has the excuse of being on the Game Boy Advance. I'm aware that SNK's financial troubles in the early 2000s had significant impacts on how the company's game creation process worked, and I suspect that Neoave would have also suffered from development issues during this period. As an arcade game that you don't play for very long, yeah, I'm sure that many players were compelled to keep feeding quarters to the machine to experience all the characters and styles, but as a home console title, I hope you aren't playing it in single player, I'll say that. In my view, the best way to experience Neoave is to go into training mode, pick a character you like, and then lab until the sun comes up, finding wacky combos and mix-ups in the process. However, this is only applicable if you're the type of player who genuinely likes spending time in training mode, as if you'd rather grind out arcade mode, you might lose interest pretty quickly. The gameplay offerings here are almost limitless, and I had a great time figuring out how it all worked. But when I left this mode to try out something else, I could feel the apathy kicking in almost immediately. To wrap up, Neoave has a fantastic character roster and set of gameplay mechanics, but its presentation and content leave much to be desired. And with that, I think I'm all KOF'd out for today. As I never played any of these 4 games before, I had a blast trying them all out, and they've all had lasting impressions on me. My favourite of the bunch, however, was definitely Sky Stage, and I intend to keep playing it whenever I need a future time killer. Man, this game is fun. Despite my criticisms with some of these games, I don't think any of them are bad, so I'd recommend trying them out if a particular one caught your interest. They're all easily accessible on PCs, and it was a good use of 2 to 3 days researching and playing them all for this video. If you would like to see more KOF spin-offs be covered in the future, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know what you think. Anyway, if you made it all the way to the end, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your time, and I hope you had a lot of fun. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.